Shannon, you're in the background, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're going to kick off the July meeting of the Hugh Cargill Trust. We'll start off with approval of the minutes
Wait.
from
Do we have to open the meeting or you just
officially
do
open.
it?
I
I'm just
never
not sure.
I never remember this protocol. Catherine, you're pretty good with that.
I actually don't remember. Let's
Okay.
open the meeting at, what time is it?
I know too.
9:03.
9:03.
Okay,
I call the meeting to order.
There you go.
9:03.
okay.
All right. Good morning, everybody. The first item was to approve the minutes from June's meeting. Hester, thank you for sending those out.
Yeah,
Any
no comments.
Okay. Then do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Okay.
Second,
All in favor? Thank
Aye.
you. I think, do we have to say it? Okay, I see it
Aye.
right.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. And then the treasurer's report, Catherine, thank you for getting that out, and the donation report.
Yeah, the treasurer's report just reflects 5 distributions from the Hugh Cargill Trust last month. And then we had donations to the Hugh Cargill Trust from 36 people, property tax relief from 11 people. The donations range in size from 10 to 26 to 1,000. So they're all over the map.
Okay,
But
but
we
they
can
still
talk
came in.
about the donation summary later unless you have a question now.
So Catherine, do the donations to the property tax relief go into their own bucket? Is that a separate?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So we have to approve that report then? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
move to approve the treasurer's report for June,
Thank
July.
you.
July.
And I need a second.
So second.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you
There's
very much. I saw Kristen raised her hand remotely. Great. So I really appreciate that Joe just jumped in to taking on the role of intake. Thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the requests that came in, but Joe, I'd love to hear from you about what you've learned, and in terms of the process that we had lined up, and whether the intake form is useful, whether there's things that you would change about it. Just, anyway, what's your thoughts after handling a few of these?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't put much stock in anything I have to say after 1 month, right?
Okay.
It was a busy month. The process seems to go pretty well. One of the things I found difficult, and it may just be getting used to it, but and I don't know if this can be if we can do something different. It's just kind of getting into a rhythm of checking the email, checking the phone, and I wonder if there's just some way for my my personal email or phone could get pinged so that I know that something has come in. I'm no longer working, so I don't have this sort of regular pattern of getting in front of my computer to check yet another email. But I mean it's not a fundamental problem. I can make it work, but I wonder if there's some way to automate that so that when something comes in, because there were a couple of things that I might have been a day or two late on, which I'm not sure is terrible, but if I were on the other end of it, I think I'd like a quicker response. That at least someone's paying attention, right?
Sure. Shannon, do you know if there's a way for that setup for the system to reach out when somebody's
We can get the email on his phone for sure.
okay.
And then the voicemails go to the email.
Right. I remember seeing that. So Joe and I met with Eddie, right, to
yeah.
get access into the account. And so we both know how to get into the phone system and the email. And I saw that the phone messages do result in an email. But it's a matter of getting the email to you and alerting you.
Right.
So Shannon, is that something that Joe should reach out to Eddie for, or?
Yeah, I can email Joe and Eddie together to see if they can meet again to get that set up on Joe's phone.
Okay. And, Shannon, I've got sort of questions for you and about, kind of the next step. So we're going to go through the request.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get, the decision and all the backup material to you?
Yeah, so Lucy previously would send me like a cover sheet that had the approvals. It was the requests, and if they were approved on the cover sheet, I could send you an example that is, I don't know how we feel, if we think it should be redacted. If it's a previous version, I can redact any personal information from it, but you can just see like the format and the request that she was providing me, and then that sort of gave me just, she'd send that to me and the backup for the request.
And sending it to you electronically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe, has there been issues with tracking down the documentation that we need?
No, not much. I mean, I had to ping a couple of people, but it wasn't. I'd say no. Right. I mean, I have everything. So it's so that's been that's been fine. In terms of the intake form, and I think just in general, I had the question: what are we collecting data for any reason? Because that would inform the data we want, right? And so is there a legal or other reason that that we want certain data other than the basic information about about the requests?
So
Right?
what kind of data are you thinking about?
Well, just an example, well, it asks for ages of children. Is that relevant information? Do we want that? What do we want it for? I guess is the question, right?
I guess for that specifically, it would probably depend on what the request was for, I suppose. But I don't know whether I can't even think of an example in my year of where that would have played a role.
It seems as though some of that information, with that being a good example, was kind of the human interest part of it. That
Okay.
at least when I joined the committee a couple years ago, Lucy would tell us long stories about each family and the family's situation, and would often, if not always, include information about the kids.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, that's
I think it
I guess that's
informs
yeah.
a little bit about whether the person can work, and how it does help
Yeah.
a little with their situation. I don't know if we need the exact age of the children, but how many children are at home? Maybe are they preschool, grade school, high school? It sort of informs a little.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have, well, Kristen has kids in the schools. The rest of us, I mean, it wouldn't help any, the rest of us would not be able to identify anybody by their children's ages. That
I've never really felt that it was necessary to know the ages. I mean, yeah, like having kids in schools, I think it's one more identifying factor that might not be necessary for the purposes of this committee.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't even know if it's ever informed, for me personally, the sort of legitimacy or necessity of the request or the help.
Right. I think that's kind of what my question was for, but I understand, Hester's and Catherine's, and I don't get a sense that there's much discomfort, again, after 1 month of doing this, for recipients to give that information. I did, and I don't know if I'm making this up, but the question about whether they receive other assistance, I sensed a couple of times like, a pause on the recipient's part, right? And again, is that do we need that data for something? Is it relevant? I mean, has the committee ever said, well, gee, they're getting, SNAP and whatever, and so they don't need help, right?
I think some of those inform that they've already been vetted by other agencies, or that they truly are in need. I think can be helpful that way.
But you don't always know how recent some of that assistant is, right?
Right.
So then it
Well,
doesn't,
we're not double checking. It's just what they say.
right. Uh, Um, I think that's one of those questions that when the request comes in for an amount greater than what we have to give, that perhaps it gives us a sense that they're really, either trying to get everything they can to make up the difference, or and they're still stuck. I don't know. It just, I guess, gives us a fuller picture.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, but not always,
Yeah.
Is it essential? Probably not to know. It almost sounds like for both of these examples, I'm hearing that each case is unique, and in some cases, some of this information is useful, and sometimes it's not at all relevant, and sometimes it's much more clear. This is just the added color.
Yeah. No, and that's valuable. I just was that one I was just a little sensitive to, because I've either imagined or inferred some sensitivity on a couple of people's responses, right? Although generally I found people, and several of the folks had received help before, so they knew the drill. But generally I found people very sort of straightforward, cooperative. Even there were two people, although one is uncertain and it's a blank on the form, but there was one person who was referred to me when I called him and talked to him. He said, "No, I'm doing fine. I don't need help. If I need it, I'll let you know." So there's, everyone kind of understands their situation, and was very clear and understanding, whenever I said, well, there's a process and we have to meet, and so on and so forth. They got it, and it was very, I wouldn't call it transactional. We had some brief, nice conversations, but it was all in all a really good experience talking to people.
Joe, did you have any sense, particularly with repeat customers, anyone thinking like, where's Lucy? I like talking to Lucy. Was there any sort of awkwardness about that?
No.
Good.
No.
Great. Great. Well, like you said, I think, 1 month's telling is, it's not much. It'll be interesting to see, next time around, whether there's additional learnings from this. But I'm glad that it's been a pretty straightforward and comfortable process, it sounds like.
Yeah, and there were a few that I flubbed in one way or another, which I'll be happy to tell you about, minor things. But I just told people, look, I'm new at this, and that was a nice conversation, actually. And people were very understanding.
Great. Good. All right. Well, we'll continue this one as we all learn and transition away from Lucy's way of doing it. Okay. And hopefully if there's a way to simplify it even more for future use. Okay, great. I just wanted to hear, if there was anything about the IT part. So I mentioned that Joe and I met with Eddie. We both have access to the system. Shannon, I don't know if whether there's been any continued conversation about a phone line or a different, a Zoom phone or some kind of online system.
Honestly, I don't think they have the bandwidth to help with this at this time. I think they're just too short-staffed, which is understandable. So I think that if you all want to move forward with like just doing a flip phone, that would come out of a reimbursement from the Hugh Cargill funds, I think we can just do that.
Okay.
So Joe, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah. It's something I'll probably do, but it'll probably take until September.
So
yeah.
until then, Joe, are you using your own phone? Are you going down to the townhouse? What are you doing?
I've been using my own phone. Yeah. And you know,
And okay, have you blocked out your number when you've made the calls?
no.
No.
I mean, that's an option, but then you don't,
Yeah.
then there's the risk that.
Right.
There are a number of people who won't accept block calls.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you know, no one has called me. And I know Lucy made the comment, and she said in all the years that she was doing it, that she may have received one call. It was not an issue for her either. So, but I'll get another phone in the fall. I'm not terribly worried about it.
Great. Well, thank you for doing that. Great. Next on it, we were just going to do an update to the annual appeal. So that was somewhat in the treasurer's report.
Yeah, I sent out the donation summary, and
That's right.
one input is wrong. For the tax relief in 2025, there were just 11 donations in June, not 112. So I'll redo that for next month.
Great.
So
I'm
there were 11 donations to the tax relief and 36 to the Hugh Cargill Trust.
And I've talked to Vanguard about their getting our donor advised fund, and I have to do it yet, but I think I have all the steps.
For how to do it?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So as soon as that's done, Shannon, I'll let you know. Although I think they have to link up with Colleen at some point, but
great.
Okay. Then I'm going to tie the property tax relief update to the annual appeal. So can I do the property tax update?
Yeah.
Please.
There were two new applicants. One meets the guidelines and one does not. Shannon, for you, the one on Main Street is 1.59 million. It doesn't meet the requirement. The one on Wilson Road does. So now we have approximately 60 people who are receiving tax relief. So on an annual basis, that's $102,000 that will go out over the next 4 quarters. And you'll see from the balance sheet that we have just under $100,000 in the account. So unless we fill that in, we have 4 quarters right now. We probably will have a shortfall next year. We won't be able to do the 425. It will depend on how much we can raise in the fall. Wendy.
Can we move money from one pot to that pot or no?
Technically we can, but I think tax relief, I'd like to have a long discussion about tax relief is really a long-term ongoing thing. And the Hugh Cargill Trust is set up more for one-offs and difficult situations. So it needs more discussion that we would take money from the Hugh Cargill to put it into at least I feel that way.
So Catherine, I was just going to comment. I know you can take it from Hugh Cargill Trust, but to your point, that's a policy discussion. And then I just want to remind you that from the trustees of town donations,
Yes.
they're going to be looking at their annual availability of funds. So there may be more funds that you could get. I don't actually know when the next meeting is, but I think, Catherine, you'll obviously be aware and notified of what funds will be available. So maybe that's a future topic.
Okay.
For FY26.
That's good to know that Shannon, do you know when that meeting will be?
You know what? I don't know that it's scheduled, Shannon, because I'm the liaison to the trustee. So I'll let you know
Yeah.
Okay.
when it is. They just met in June, so I just don't know actually if they've set the next date.
Okay,
So
great.
I'll let you know.
Because we will want to be on that agenda for several things.
So Catherine, I have a question. So I saw 2 requests for tax relief. I think one you mentioned is the Main Street one that is over the assessment is over the threshold.
Yeah.
And maybe this question is for later, but does that end the request, or do we then, and it's related to what we just talked about, do we then still consider it under the Hugh Cargill Trust umbrella?
I'm uncomfortable with taking it from the Hugh Cargill Trust account.
Okay.
But others may have, I mean, I think we need to
Yeah.
discuss it.
The other, and that, I mean, that'll help me because I had a long conversation with that person, and, you know, without fully understanding this. So I was careful, you know, in what I said. And I I also saw another request for an address you didn't mention on Ridgewood Road.
Did not have a Ridgewood Road one.
Okay. Okay, because you referenced something else, and I didn't see the one you referenced, but I have another
We
one.
can look up the property value of the Ridgewood Road to see if it would fit, and then they can apply for next quarter for the property
Well,
tax.
it does fit, and I got a request last month. I mean, June, it's a June request.
Right, and they submitted the application, because I also am learning this part with Joe as well, you know,
Yeah.
about what
So
happened.
Shannon, did you see one for Ridgewood Road?
No, so me and Catherine are both confused.
Yeah, well, it makes three of us.
For, I think they just submitted it directly after reading whatever is on the website. Is that right, Joe? That they saw it, they saw the application, or maybe they called you, but they saw the application online.
So, you know, they probably emailed it to the Hugh Cargill Trust email account, which I don't receive. So if no one sends it to me, then I don't send it to Catherine.
I think that's right. I mean, they use the PDF form online, but
Okay, so me and Catherine just didn't get it. If you receive those to that email, if you could forward them to me, please.
okay.
Sorry, Joe, I didn't know that process either.
That's fine. And it's in my list, so we can, I mean, I don't know if it's, I mean, we can consider it, correct? All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like for a later meeting, we're gonna have a more serious conversation about the property tax relief fund and what happens, what's our policy around, for one, borrowing, moving funds from one trust to another, also what the town fund might be able to allocate, and then what do we do in situations where the money runs out, which we don't want. You know, it's interesting because you remember there was Shannon, you forwarded to us communications that came after the annual appeal. And, you know, one was a little off, because it was blaming us for our tone deaf request for additional funds for tax relief, given what the town had just done. And it was, we're not at fault there, you know, but, you know, there might be some resentment and people not wanting to pay up for this one.
Yeah. And as far as the fundraising in the fall, I think some of the larger donations do come in December when people look at their Vanguard accounts and make decisions. So Shannon, we'll have to hone those lists so we're not sending double requests this year. But I can talk to you about how we figure that out. Maybe Kristen could help with that too. Kristen has fundraising experience as well, so
That'll be helpful.
there.
Happy to help out.
Great.
And Kristen, I did see your note that you're dropping off in a few minutes, so.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. This was a last minute work trip that I can't avoid. I'd much rather be on Zoom with you.
Well, thank you. All right, so, and it sounds like with the annual appeal, we're gonna go back to the fall because it was not a good experiment to do it in the spring. And is this fall one that's the more limited list? You know, there's the townwide and then we go to a smaller one? That's it? Okay.
I think we'll go to a much smaller one and target it to people who did not give. Or maybe we can word the letter to say, if you gave in April, thank you. But if you missed that, I don't know how we'll word that, but Kristen and the committee can think about that.
There's no harm, and in fact, a lot of data that suggests asking twice is all right. It's good.
Okay. Well,
It's effective. Yep.
Yeah, often you have to ask 3 times to get a yes. So I'm all in favor of actually doing way more full town-wide, you know, cost associated. I get it, but I don't see, just from the limited data that we have, the fact that we typically bring in so much more money with a town-wide mailing, and that's standard in nonprofit practice. I see no reason why we wouldn't at least consider doing that.
and I think it would be a little less because we probably would not put the bookmark, whatever we did, the quarter sheet in the spring. We might not have to do that.
Right.
just a lighter or smaller one. But, all right, well, that's something we can talk about in the fall.
Great. On my September agenda. Note. Great. Okay, and then is there anything else for this portion of the meeting when we have Wendy and Shannon with us? If not, can I get a motion to adjourn this open part of the Hugh Cargill Trust before we resume to executive session?
I move that we adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing individuals or families seeking assistance, the disclosure of which would be a violation of privacy. Shannon, do we have another link to go to that meeting, or are you going to just block this one?
I'm just gonna unlock this one.
Great.
Okay, see you all later. Thanks.
Bye, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Shannon.